Before you even knew how to speak, a silent contract had already been signed on your behalf, not with ink and paper, but with energy, emotion, and repetition. Owen Hermstring calls this the original programming, and it begins the moment you're born into a world that has already decided what is acceptable, possible, and worthy of success. You weren't handed the pen to write your own story. Instead, your nervous system became the page where others started to write for you. The way your parents reacted to stress, the tone in their voice when they mentioned money, the warmth or coldness in their touch when you cried, all of it coded your beliefs about whether life would be safe, abundant, or something to survive. Most people don't realize this, but failure isn't something we learn consciously. It's something we absorb energetically. Hermstring explains that between birth and age 7, your subconscious mind operates in a theta-dominant brainwave state, a level of deep receptivity, similar to hypnosis. During these years, you are not filtering experiences. You are absorbing them as truth. So when your mother constantly stressed about bills or your father disappeared when you needed him most, you weren't just witnessing those events. You were building an inner blueprint. That blueprint may have told you that love is inconsistent, money is dangerous, or attention is something you have to earn through performance. And if no one ever helped you rewrite that blueprint, you're likely still living by it today. The danger of this unconscious programming is how invisible it becomes over time. You grow up thinking, that's just the way I am, or that's just the way life is. But Hermstring is clear. These aren't personality traits. They're energetic contracts. They dictate what you believe you deserve, how much joy you can tolerate, and how close you allow yourself to get to success before sabotaging it. This is why people can read all the books, follow all the strategies, repeat all the affirmations, and still end up back where they started, because what's written in the energetic field always overrides what's said with the conscious mind. One of the most haunting lines from Hermstring's work is this: "You were born with a blank frequency, but the world rushed to fill it. What filled it were the silent fears of your caretakers, the limitations of your culture, and the inherited trauma of your lineage. And once those frequencies settled in, they began to magnetize life experiences that confirmed them. If you believed love meant abandonment, you attracted partners who left. If you believed money caused conflict, you repelled opportunities that could lead to it. This isn't the law of attraction in its superficial sense. It's the law of vibrational loyalty. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are willing to allow based on what you've been taught to expect. But here's the critical truth Hermstring wants you to understand. This programming isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility to change. Awareness is the first crack in the matrix. Once you see the blueprint, you can challenge it. You can begin to ask, who gave me this definition of success? Who taught me that love is conditional? Why do I believe struggle is necessary for growth? These questions are not intellectual, they are energetic. And each time you ask them, you weaken the contract that has been running your life from the shadows. No child chooses to be programmed for failure, but every adult has the opportunity to interrupt the pattern. And as Hermstring reminds us, the moment you recognize you are the author, the contract begins to dissolve. This is not about blame, it's about liberation. You are not broken, you are not cursed, you are simply operating under a system that was installed without your consent. And now finally you are waking up. Most people live under the comforting illusion that their choices are entirely their own. You choose what to eat, where to work, who to love, how to spend your time, and you assume it's all the result of your personal desires. But Owen Hermstring dismantles this illusion with one fundamental premise. You don't choose from freedom, you choose from conditioning. And as long as that conditioning remains unexamined, your so-called choices are nothing more than responses to unseen programming installed before you ever had the awareness to question it. Think of your mind like a hallway with dozens of doors. You may feel free because you get to pick one, but no one told you that you didn't build the hallway. You're selecting from options that were handed to you by your parents, teachers, media, culture, and generational traumas. You might say, I want a stable job, but is that true freedom? Or did you absorb the fear of instability from a father who was once laid off? You might say, I don't need love right now, but is that self-assurance or a defense mechanism formed when your first experience of love ended in betrayal? Hermstring writes, the ego defends the cage while painting it gold. You mistake your programming for your personality and your fears for your standards. That sentence hits like a quiet storm. It invites you to look deeper, not just at what you choose, but at why you choose it. Every preference, every decision, every limit you place on yourself may actually be a mirror reflecting not your truth, but your emotional inheritance. Even rebellion isn't free will. Many believe they've broken the cycle by doing the opposite of what they were taught, but acting from rebellion is still acting in reaction to the same system. It's still the system pulling the strings. It just wears a different mask. Whether you follow or resist the pattern, you're still inside the influence of that pattern. Freedom doesn't come from reacting to the program. It comes from seeing it, detaching from it, and creating from a space it never touched. Hermstring illustrates this point with a powerful metaphor. Imagine a marionette puppet that becomes aware it's on strings. The puppet may try to twist and jerk to move in new ways, but the strings still determine its path. True liberation begins not with better movement, but with severing the strings. Until then, your actions are animated by ghosts. Ghosts of your mother's anxieties, your community's limitations, your ancestors' wounds. This is where most people feel uncomfortable. They realize they've built their entire lives on choices that weren't truly theirs. Careers, relationships, identities, they all start to feel hollow, like costumes worn for an audience they never agreed to perform for. That discomfort is the beginning of freedom. Because when the illusion of choice crumbles, the door to conscious creation opens. You can't heal what you still call a decision. You have to name it for what it is: conditioning, survival strategy, energetic echo. Hermstring urges us to stop asking, what do I want, and start asking, who told me what to want? That single question has the power to unravel years of mental fog and emotional compromise. It peels back the veil and reveals a truth few dare to see. You have been guided not by intention, but by invisible agreements signed in your unconscious mind. But there is good news. Once you see this, you can begin to slow down. You can pause before every action and ask, is this me or my programming? That one pause creates space, and in that space, true will can begin to emerge. Not the will to please or to impress or to survive, but the will to express what your soul has wanted all along. Free will is not about unlimited options. It's about aligned actions. It's not the ability to pick anything. It's the ability to choose what reflects your real self, even if you've never seen that choice modeled before. As Hermstring writes, the soul whispers a truth the ego can't hear. You were never here to obey. You were here to remember. And that remembrance begins the moment you stop mistaking the program for your path. You may think your childhood is behind you. You may believe the past has been buried, healed, or at the very least left behind in some dusty chapter of your timeline. But what if the past isn't behind you at all? What if it's still speaking through your tone of voice, your emotional triggers, your relationships, and your deepest fears? Owen Hermstring calls this invisible influence the echo loop. The ongoing repetition of early emotional imprints that shape your present without asking for permission. It starts innocently. A child misinterprets an event. A cold response from a parent, a dismissive teacher, a moment of public shame. That moment becomes a script. The mind doesn't understand complexity yet. It only knows how to survive. So it writes rules. If I cry, I'm weak. If I ask for help, I'm a burden. If I succeed, they'll leave. These unconscious conclusions harden into emotional blueprints. And the most dangerous part, you don't even know you're following them. Hermstring writes, the child writes the code, the adult obeys it. That single line reorients everything. Because it means your present behaviors, your patterns, your decisions, your limitations, may not be logical. They may not even be yours. They're echoes. Old vibrations vibrating through new circumstances. That's why you may keep dating the same kind of emotionally unavailable partner, even when you swear you've changed. That's why success may always feel fleeting, just out of reach, as if something inside you keeps pulling the brakes the moment you accelerate. Your life is not just responding to what's happening now, it's responding to what your nervous system learned years ago. The echo loop doesn't care about logic, it only cares about familiarity. That's why trauma survivors often find themselves drawn to chaos or abandonment, not because they want it, but because it matches the emotional frequency they were conditioned to recognize as home. You might think you're chasing success, but you're actually running from a childhood belief that said, too much attention is dangerous. You might think you're independent, but your hyper-independence may just be a child who gave up on being rescued. The echo loop is not about what happened, it's about what you decided it meant. And those meanings, unless rewritten, continue to write your life in the present tense. Hermstring warns, healing doesn't come from remembering what happened. It comes from unbinding the beliefs you built around it. This is where most people get stuck. They intellectually understand their childhood. They even forgive their parents, but they never dissolve the inner contracts they made to stay safe. And so the loop continues. The only way to break the echo loop is to listen. When you react strongly to something, a comment, a rejection, a silence, that's your clue. The echo is active. Ask yourself, what does this remind me of? Whose voice is this in my head? What belief am I acting out right now that no longer serves me? Awareness is the first knife that cuts the loop, but action is the second. You have to begin choosing differently, not from fear, but from self-recognition. If the child believed they weren't worthy of love unless they were perfect, the adult must begin choosing rest over performance. If the child believed speaking up led to punishment, the adult must choose expression over silence. These aren't easy choices, but they're the only ones that break the pattern. Hermstring compares this process to stepping out of a haunted house. At first, the door doesn't open, then you realize it was never locked. You just never thought you were allowed to leave. That's the nature of the echo loop. It isn't real anymore, but it becomes real every time you unconsciously obey its rules. You are not broken. You're simply running an old emotional script on a new stage. The moment you question the script, you reclaim the pen, and with that pen, you begin to write a new story, not one dictated by echoes, but one led by truth. You've probably described yourself using phrases like, "I'm just not that kind of person," or "That's not who I am." Maybe you've proudly claimed an identity, strong, independent, logical, humble, a giver, a survivor. At first glance, these sound like badges of honor. But what if I told you these self-definitions, even the flattering ones, are often prisons? According to Owen Hermstring, identity is the most seductive form of limitation because it feels like truth when it's actually defense. We're taught early on to find ourselves, to build a consistent personality. Society rewards people who can be easily understood and categorized, but in doing so, we create a cage and call it self-knowledge. Hermstring writes, "The strongest chains are made of words you've repeated so often they become bone. And those words, your I ams, form the walls of the identity trap." Let's say you grew up needing to be the responsible one. Maybe your household was unstable, so you learned that being the caretaker kept the peace. Over time, this role calcifies into identity. I'm the strong one. I don't need help. I'm the provider. But what happens when your soul longs to rest? What happens when your heart aches for softness, vulnerability, or support? That identity you once needed for survival now denies you nourishment, or maybe you were labeled the quiet one, the good girl, or the nice guy. These seem harmless until you realize they've cost you your voice, your boundaries, your anger, your truth. When you try to speak up, shame rises. Not because the truth is wrong, but because it violates the identity you've clung to for decades. Hermstring's view is radical. Identity is not who you are. It's who you agreed to be in exchange for safety, love, or belonging. Let that sink in. Your deepest patterns of behavior may not be expressions of your true self. They're contracts. They were useful once, but now they limit how far reality can bend in your favor. Here's the hidden danger. Reality doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to who you are energetically being. If you identify as someone who always struggles, who's unlucky, who's too much or not enough, the universe delivers matching experiences. You affirm your stuckness every time you repeat your own label, and most people don't realize they're doing it. You'll hear it in casual language. "I'm not good with money. I always attract the wrong partners." "I could never do that." Harmless phrases, right? But energetically they are declarations, orders given to the reality you live in. You become imprisoned not by fate, but by repetition. Breaking the identity trap starts with noticing the labels you've worn too long. Ask yourself, who told me I had to be this? What version of me am I protecting by refusing to evolve? What am I afraid would happen if I stopped performing this identity? This work is not about reinventing yourself from scratch. It's about remembering the parts of you you've buried to keep others comfortable. Hermstring writes, "The self you truly are doesn't need identity. It simply is. It expands by permission, not permission slips." That's the goal, not to build a new identity, but to become someone reality cannot categorize. Try replacing "I am" with "I'm experimenting with unfoa" instead. Shift from fixed to fluid. Instead of "I'm bad at confrontation," try "I'm learning to express hard truths." That tiny shift cracks the identity open. It lets new energy in, and new energy creates new outcomes. Your greatest potential lies outside your current definition of self. If you can say, "Maybe I'm more than I think," you unlock the doorway to a life that's wider, fuller, and more aligned. The moment you stop defending your identity, you begin discovering your power. The trap is only a trap if you never question it. Once you do, it becomes a mirror. And through that mirror, you meet the self that's been waiting, unlabeled, limitless, and finally free. Have you ever tried everything? Affirmations, visualization, intention setting, only to feel like nothing moves? Like you're stuck in energetic quicksand, even though you're doing all the right things? According to Owen Hermstring, the issue may not be your desire, it's the leaks. Energetic leaks, small, often unnoticed ways your power seeps out of you day after day, are the hidden saboteurs of manifestation. And worse, they're usually disguised as being helpful, responsible, or loyal. Hermstring explains in The Law Behind the Laws that manifestation isn't about the amount of effort you apply, but about how much unified energy you hold. When your attention is scattered, when your emotional bandwidth is drained by unspoken resentment, unfinished boundaries, or habitual guilt, you're trying to manifest with a cup that's cracked and leaking. He writes, "You cannot summon abundance while negotiating with your own depletion." Energetic leaks don't always scream, most whisper. They show up in people-pleasing, over-explaining, chasing unavailable people, staying in situations you've outgrown, or even obsessing over outcomes you cannot control. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you lose voltage. Every time you hold back what you truly feel to keep the peace, you compromise your signal. And when your internal signal is distorted, the external reality responds with confusion or stagnation. Let's make it tangible. Imagine you're trying to manifest a healthier, more aligned relationship. You do your visualizations every morning. You journal at night. But during the day, you're texting someone who disrespects you, checking if they've viewed your story, overanalyzing every word they send or don't send. That's not neutral energy, that's an emotional leak. And it's like trying to fill a lake with a leaking bucket. Or perhaps you want financial breakthrough. You work overtime, study success strategies, even repeat money mantras, but your energy is still tied to a job that makes you feel small. You complain about your boss daily. You feel dread every Monday. That complaint loop, internal or external, is another leak. Hermstring is clear. Manifestation isn't about doing more. It's about sealing the gaps where your truth bleeds out. One of the most overlooked leaks is unexpressed anger. Not rage that explodes, but quiet, internalized frustration that gets swallowed. Many people suppress anger because they think it's not spiritual or loving. But as Hermstring notes, every time you silence your sacred no, you weaken your sacred yes. When you tolerate mistreatment, overlook misalignment, or pretend something is okay when it isn't, you fracture your integrity. And integrity is the spine of manifestation. So how do you begin to seal these leaks? First, you must get radically honest. Ask yourself, what am I still giving energy to that gives nothing back? What conversations am I avoiding? Who or what do I feel obligated to carry, even if it's draining me? These are the places your power is leaking. Then begin reclaiming energy in small, intentional ways. It might mean taking a break from a draining friendship, saying no without justifying it, letting go of the need to prove yourself. Resting without guilt, closing a chapter you've already emotionally outgrown. These acts aren't dramatic, but they're magnetic, because every time you honor your energy, your frequency rises, and the universe doesn't respond to effort, it responds to frequency. Hermstring encourages this mantra: I am not available for what drains me, even if it's familiar. I choose resonance over loyalty to pain. That declaration alone begins to close the leak. It signals to life that you're no longer tolerating the misalignment you used to accept. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be clean. Clean in your intention, your boundaries, your truth. That's when manifestation accelerates. That's when your desires find you. Because there's finally a place for them to land. You're not stuck, you're just leaking. And the moment you begin sealing those cracks, reality begins to shift. Quietly at first, then all at once. There's a secret contract many of us unknowingly signed long before we could speak. It's not written in ink, but in energy, absorbed through family patterns, societal expectations, and cultural conditioning. Owen Hermstring calls this the contract of struggle, a silent agreement with life that says, if I suffer enough, I will deserve peace. If I work hard enough, I will earn love. And even though we consciously long for ease, abundance, and joy, this invisible contract keeps pulling us back into cycles of effort, pain, and resistance. It's not your fault. Most of us were taught to associate worth with effort, to measure our value by how much we sacrifice. We were praised for enduring, admired for staying strong, rewarded for pushing through, even when we were breaking inside. So we internalized the idea that ease is suspicious, that rest is laziness, that receiving without struggle is undeserved. In The Law Behind the Laws, Hermstring writes, the reality you attract isn't based on what you want. It's based on the identity you're loyal to, and if your identity is tied to struggle, your energy will reject anything that feels too good, too free, too easy. That explains why so many people sabotage relationships when they feel too healthy, walk away from opportunities that feel too aligned, or resist income that feels unearned. There's a deep part of the psyche, programmed by generations of hardship, that believes ease must be a trap, that if you didn't bleed for it, you can't trust it. This is the essence of the contract of struggle. But here's the painful irony. The more you try to escape difficulty from a place of unworthiness, the more you loop it. Because on a vibrational level, you're still saying, I must prove my right to exist. I must work for what I want. And that frequency continues to attract situations that validate the contract you never meant to sign. So how do you break this energetic agreement? First, you must recognize it. Begin noticing where struggle feels normal to you. Where does ease make you uncomfortable? Where do you feel the need to explain, justify, or apologize for receiving good things? Hermstring teaches that the presence of guilt in ease is the first sign that the contract is active. Second, you need to rewrite the agreement, not just with your words, but with your nervous system. This means slowly beginning to receive without guilt. It might start with accepting help when it's offered, saying yes to something that feels too good, allowing a compliment to land without deflecting it, resting without earning it first. These are micro-defiances against the lie that struggle is your only path to success. Hermstring suggests a daily affirmation, I do not need to struggle to be worthy. I allow ease. I allow alignment. I am safe in softness. Repeating it isn't just about positive thinking. It's about energetically signaling to your subconscious that the old contract is being torn up. But don't be surprised if resistance shows up. The identity tied to struggle will fight for its survival. You might feel fear, doubt, even grief, as if you're betraying a legacy. And in a way, you are. You're betraying the trauma you inherited. You're breaking a chain that says life must be hard to be meaningful. And that betrayal is holy. One of the most powerful insights from Hermstring's work is this. Your highest reality doesn't require your pain. It requires your permission. That permission begins when you choose not to argue for your limitations, when you stop bonding with others through pain stories, when you stop making struggle your currency for worth. This shift isn't immediate, but it is transformational. As you begin to embody the belief that ease is not a sin, that alignment is not selfish, that joy doesn't require permission slips, life begins to meet you there. Because the universe doesn't reward struggle, it responds to congruence. You are allowed to have peace. You are allowed to receive without proving. You are allowed to rewrite the story that says you must suffer to be seen. The contract has always been optional. You just didn't know you could say no. Everything in your external life is filtered through one silent gatekeeper, your frequency. Not your effort, not your wishes, Not even your plans, just your energy, your current internal state. It is this unseen field that gives permission or denial to what enters your life. And unless that field changes, nothing else does, not permanently. Owen Hermstring writes, "Energy is loyal to identity. Reality follows energy." If you want to change your world, stop rewriting the script and start retuning the actor. What he's pointing to is a core truth. Your frequency, the emotional and vibrational tone you live in daily, determines what is available to you. Think about it this way. Someone can hand you a key, but if you're vibrating at the wrong level, you won't even see the door. You'll walk right past it, convinced the key is useless. That's why opportunities don't stick. That's why new relationships feel like the old ones. That's why money disappears just as fast as it arrives. Your frequency isn't aligned with the version of life you say you want, and this isn't spiritual poetry. It's energetic mechanics. Every belief, every emotion, every thought contributes to your field. Fear, shame, lack, guilt. They don't just weigh you down emotionally. They lower your field's magnetism. They cause you to overlook, mistrust, or even reject the very things that could liberate you. Not because you don't want them, but because your field is programmed not to allow them. Hermstring compares it to a thermostat. You can open all the windows and beg for fresh air. But if your thermostat is locked at 50, the system will keep cooling your reality back to what feels familiar. In other words, you're not being punished. You're just being matched. Matched to the level of frequency you haven't yet upgraded. So how do you change it? You don't force it, you tune it. This begins by observing the emotional baseline you live in. Is it anxiety, proving, performing, survival, desperation? If so, then that's the frequency currently attracting more of itself into your life. Not because you're weak, but because energy multiplies its own kind. Your job isn't to shame yourself for that. It's to bring it into awareness without judgment. Because the moment you observe a pattern clearly, you begin to weaken its hold. The next step is emotional calibration. This isn't about pretending to be happy or faking gratitude. It's about finding true alignment, the emotional states that feel real and steady to you. That could mean peace, stillness, curiosity, self-trust. Hermstring suggests that the fastest way to raise your frequency is to act as if peace were normal. That means making decisions from centeredness, not fear. That means slowing down. That means trusting that what's aligned doesn't rush you. One of the most striking lines in his book says, "You don't need more light. You need to stop arguing for your darkness." And that's exactly what frequency elevation is. Not about fixing yourself, but about letting go of the noise that distorts your signal, about remembering that your true essence is already magnetic, already enough, already tuned to truth. What's been missing isn't capacity, it's clarity. Because when your frequency changes, everything else must respond. Not because the universe suddenly decides to bless you, but because you finally became the version of yourself that could hold the blessing, not temporarily, but consistently. This is the real contract, the real law, not the external rules they taught you, not the endless hustle, but the quiet frequency you carry when no one's watching. You want change? Tune your field. You want love? Live from the frequency of already being worthy. You want abundance? Live from the belief that nothing outside you completes you. The moment you tune to that, the game resets, and nothing, truly nothing,